This podcast will fail, mostly because nobody's going to listen to it, but you might prove me wrong. Who knows? And episode 38, this podcast will fail. I am just some guy. Who I am and where I am is irrelevant to the conversations that I come here to have with you and with myself and very nearly someone else just a minute ago too. So this may sound a little off. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to come out sounding because I'm in a conference room at work and it's very echoey in this space. This is like a 10 by 10 room. So there's definitely some sound bouncing around and echoing. And then there's this heat vent in the ceiling above me that's just freaking blasting. I don't know how loud that is. It seems like a weird week. I'm going to pick the phone up here and bring it a little closer. Use it like an actual microphone. I don't know if that's any better, but this has been an odd week for audio. Yesterday, apparently, I didn't realize until I sat down to edit that there was a phone call buzzing into the recording right at the opening. So I'm sitting there editing it, and what the heck is that? My wife's looking over her shoulder, giving me like side eye, like, what in the world happened on your podcast? I don't know. I guess somebody was calling me. So, okay, fine. That doesn't really matter. We're here to have a conversation. That's all. You know, audio quality is what it is. I've heard much, much worse, as I listen around to different things on the internets. So, I today want to talk a little bit about society. I had a meeting earlier today at work that, the basic crux of the meeting was around our employees, my staff, and some different things that we're trying to figure out within the management team. One of the key pieces that came out of the conversation was looking at the culture and attitudes and work ethic and just the general sense of different age groups in the workplace. There's a lot of assumptions made about different groups, and you can kind of break our society, unfortunately, into subsets: the baby boomers, the Gen Xers like me, the millennials, the zennials, the whatever my youngest kids are supposed to be called now. And you do find, unfortunately, a lot of variances, but commonalities in the way that people of different age groups conduct themselves at work. Such as to say, it is unfortunate that many of the 20-somethings and maybe even like the younger 30-somethings, there's a better than good chance, unfortunately, that they may not have the strongest work ethic. But that's not always the case, and there's no 100% blanket on any of it. It's just one of those things that you observe in the world. I've got a definite baby boomer who is one of the hardest workers I've ever hired, ever. And I feel horrible. She should have been able to retire a long time ago, but you know what? Her life circumstances, she has to continue working at age 70. And she struggles sometimes with the technology and with keeping up pace. But I'll tell you, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, she works harder than anyone in our team. So there's that. And it just got me kind of thinking about a conversation that I've never really had with the online world in any of my previous digital enterprises here. I've had this conversation with people in person from time to time here and there, but I've never really laid it out in a recording. It's because I have a bit of a theory on society, specifically American society. Now, I don't know where you are. I don't even know if you're listening coming on 5 minutes into this, but in American society, I have always observed kind of this like cycle of attitudes and norms in society. And I think that it tends to go on like a 40-year cycle, right? It's like a wheel. What goes around comes around, and things come back again. So I'll give you an example. I usually start this in the mid to late 1800s. Okay, look at 1860 to 1880. This was the peak of the quote-unquote Wild West. A lot of culture started to coalesce around the major cities. You started to see on the East Coast, New York and all of that, start to become this sort of metropolitan area. And you see over the course of a decade or two that society goes from this, again, Wild West, anything goes, lawless nation, sort of, loose network of towns and cities and states that sort of have different varying types of government or even police presence, sheriffs everywhere, and there's all kinds of different, it is what it is. People having gunfights in the street. A duel was a way to settle things. But then as you move into the late 1800s and as you creep towards 1900, society tends to tighten up a little bit here. Now all of a sudden there is this sort of odd conservatism that starts to take hold, and it's a different kind of conservatism because it's 100 years ago, 110 years ago now. But you see family units becoming more important. You see steady work in factories as the Industrial Revolution really took hold. Everyone, all of a sudden, instead of valuing this eking out a life in the middle of nowhere with your bare hands and what you can do, you started to see a trend towards a centralized society. Okay, everybody get in line, everybody go into the building every day and work hard and make machines and make whatever and get home and start to build a life. And you really see, as you move into 1900 towards 1910, now you're almost moved into this kind of really rigid society, right? Nothing was accepted. Nothing was accepted except for hard work, honesty. It was really as I said, a tight society, right? Everyone expected you to go with the flow, go with the program, do what you need to do, and be part of the world. But then you started to see pushback and cracks, and you started to see hyper capitalism, and you started to see the rise of more of the idea of organized crime, right? So now you've gotten yourself into, after 1910, into the 20s, you start to see a focus on capitalism, making money. Now it's about the robber barons. Now it's about the big conglomerates, the JP Morgans. It's about it's about who's going to have the most and who's in control of everything, which naturally then gives rise to organized crime, saying, well, we can make a lot of money too, and it doesn't have to be honest and legal. And now you've got the gangster shootouts of the 20s, the roaring 20s. You've got this sudden release of society, and all of a sudden everything goes. Now all of this, I almost want to say, kind of repressed culture in this country in the 20s locks in, or excuse me, explodes and lets go. And here you go. Now it's the speakeasy 20s, anything, and as we move into the 30s, and then we get this huge financial collapse, right? The Great Depression takes in, and now all of a sudden it is back to this kind of now the cycle has turned, having nothing. Everyone lost everything, right? The whole country ground practically to a halt after the Great Depression, and everyone had to kind of stop and take a breath, because we had gone through this huge social revolution. Norms were expanded. We're in and out of prohibition. All of these things that are taking place. Well, now as you move into the 40s, you start to see a calming of society. 1940 starts to look a lot like 1890, right? You've got a society that now values the family unit again. Everybody needs to just take it easy, do your work, take care of your family, do what you need to do, and build a life. The world's going nuts all around us, by the way. We've dealt with World War I already, but now we're seeing World War II. All of this is happening, but American society is responding basically by calming the hell down. The Roaring '20s are replaced now with this more conservative society. You move into the 50s. Okay, now the 50s, Ward and the Beaver, right? Leave It to Beaver and Happy Days Happy Days is the 70s, so a parody of the 50s. But everyone valued culture. Everyone valued being righteous and patriotism, and stand up for what you believe in. Okay, but it was all this is the period of time when Congress added the words "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance, right? So you've got this, once again, 1950s looks a heck of a lot like 1900s and 1910, right? Everything's rigid, everything is static. All right, move into the 60s. You know it's coming. Here comes the sexual revolution. Here comes the cracks in society. Here comes the drug epidemic, so to speak. Here comes more widespread use and acceptance of psychedelics and marijuana and free love, and social norms are challenged and smashed. Now, I'm not making value judgments on any of it, right? And I'm going to pause here as we've moved, from basically 1860 now through 1960, moved through 100 years. I've shown you how this theory of mine, that this 40-year wheel continues to turn. All right. I'm not saying one side or the other is better. I'm kind of in the middle. I see a lot of value in some of the things that tightened up in society, but I also see a lot of value in society finally waking up and growing up and realizing that there is more to life than just following social norms. Okay, there's value on both sides. I'm a child of the 80s. You can guess what I was all about growing up into the 90s. Okay, so let me get back to the story here. We're now in 1960 into 1970. Things are falling apart. Vietnam, more wars, more things just kind of crashing and slowing down. In 1970, sure does look an awful lot like 1930, right? There's a lot of just concern and worry. What's happening? Nothing's happening. The country's kind of just stuck in place, and there's no economic growth, and there's no there's nothing driving America forward at that point. As you move into the 80s, guess who's back? Your friend hypercapitalism has come back around again by the 80s, and there's kind of this 80s was that period of time when being a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, was the popular thing. That was kind of the high society sort of life with fashionable clothes and fancy cars, and hypercapitalism kind of not only came back, but it sort of melded with the quote unquote family unit, right? Think of the shows that were on TV during the 80s, right? Family Ties and these types of family-driven comedies, and really back to work, right? Everybody's in the office building now, not in factories anymore. It's not that people are pouring into factories necessarily. They are, don't get me wrong. But the push in society is to move into offices and make money. Okay. By the time you get into the 90s, when I'm coming up, guess what, baby? Counterculture is roaring back like you wouldn't believe. Now I sound like the president. Counterculture is expanding and becoming the regular culture. And now, once again, we see the country smashing through norms and expanding everybody's beliefs in what's allowable, what's possible, what freedom of self-expression means. Now, this is, again, in the 2000s. We haven't seen this since the 60s. 40 years. 40 years, 40 years, 40 years. Okay? So now we're in the 2000s. Everything's kind of opening up. Everything's, it's all about, your friend hypercapitalism never really went away. And here we go as we move into the 2000s. 2008 hits, and boom. It is the financial restriction all over again. It was in the 30s, it was in the 70s, and here we are in 2010, and the world has fallen apart financially. Me personally, I was there. It's maybe tomorrow tomorrow's my birthday. I won't talk about this tomorrow, but pretty soon. Before I wrap up this season, I better talk about my role and the part I played in the financial meltdown of 2008. Yeah, I was there and I had a hand in it. Sorry. That's a story for next time. Where was I? 2010? All right, so here we are. We saw a restriction, and then we saw in 2008, 2012, things start to come together. People start to kind of almost calm down a little bit, right? People coalesced behind a popular candidate who spoke to the people, and that was President Obama, okay? In 2016, the country coalesced around something of a populist, okay? And someone who spoke to the common man's fears and wants and worries, and the country is responded to that. But you see, here we are as we're moving into 2020. Okay, the wheel is beginning to turn again. It never really stopped turning, but the wheel is very quickly coming back around. Right, we came off of a financial crisis. Things have calmed down. Things seem kind of stiff right now. The world, thankfully, the world has managed to hold on to progress in a lot of ways. The quality of life, the standard of life, the ability to make a living, and the ability to get an education. Like, there's been progress all along the way. We're so much further ahead than we were in 1860 as a society. But you can still kind of see some of these things playing themselves again. So what's next? What comes next? Well, we are at the tail end of a calm place in society. Next week is an election that is going to determine what happens between now, effectively now, and the end of the next decade. It is really going to have a big determining factor on where we go from here. According to my 40-year model, okay, 2025, 2030 should look a lot more like the roaring 90s. I don't know if that's the case or not, and that remains to be seen. But that's just how I've always viewed society. I've always seen these patterns of, open, free, love-free society, and then hypercapitalism and just nonsense and madness, and then a restriction where everybody kind of reins in and pulls in and calms down, and eventually that becomes static and stodgy, and people break out, and the next wave of culture takes over. Lather, rinse, repeat. Welcome to America. Okay, so I to me that's interesting. I don't know if that's interesting to you, but that's what I wanted to talk about today. So there you go. I wish that I could ask you if you thought that was interesting. Haven't gotten to that point yet, but I'm working on it. But that's that's it. That's all I'm going to do for today. So thank you so much if you took a moment to listen to this, especially if you found it interesting and made it all the way to the end. I appreciate you and your time very much. And as always, wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this, I hope you have a good one.